back-channel talks to end the 40-year-old armed struggle that
Syrian Democratic Forces. The long struggle for the autonomy of the Kurds in Iraq achieved a significant milestone in their quest for self-governance after the first Gulf War in 1991. The removal of Saddam Hussein regime in 2003 and coupled with the ratification of the Iraqi constitution in 2005 marked as the establishment of semi-autonomous Kurdistan region in Iraq. These developments represent a historical turning point not only for the Kurds within Iraq, but also for the Kurds living in Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, as the Kurdistan region of Iraq and its governing institution emerged as the sole constitutionally and internationally recognized Kurdish entity. Furthermore, the Kurdistan Regional Government or Kurdistan region of Iraq stand as one of the few examples of decentralization, or if you like, a federative political structure in the Middle East, highlighting its unique position in a predominantly characterized by centralized government system. There are some examples of the federative system in the Middle East. One example is United Arab Emirates, but in the modern sense is not such what we have in Belgium or in another federative system. In this context, KRG is the unique system that exists only in the Middle East when we look at around the other countries. There are power sharing systems in Iraq and Lebanon, but Lebanon is not a federative state. It's mostly organized around the religious communities. So the Kurdistan region of Iraq is a state within a state with its own government, parliament, and security forces. And it's enjoyed, I'm using the term enjoyed, not enjoy, significant autonomy, including control over its natural resources and internal security. However, after the consolidation of power by the federal government of Iraqi government, and political elites started to question the 2005 Iraqi constitution and intentionally not fulfilling the constitutional obligation towards the Kurds, including holding a referendum mandated by Article 140 of the Constitution of Iraq, and originally planned for 15 November 2007 on the future of disputed Kurdish territories and sharing oil and gas revenues with the KRG. The federal government works very hard to take the country back to a strong, centralized, where every single policy making and decisions are taken by Baghdad, and this is absolutely a breach of the Iraqi constitutions. There are three major issues, major problems, unsolved issues between the Kurdistan regional government and Iraqi central government. The first is dispute over share of budget, a persisting source of the tension between the Kurdistan regional government and the federal government of Iraq, resolved around the budget allocation and oil revenue sharing. In 2004, Iraq's then Prime Minister Ayat Alawi allocated 7% of the national budget to the Kurdistan region, leading an economic boom and development in the region. For years, relations between Baghdad and Erbil were stable. However, in 2014, Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki unexpectedly cut the KRG's budget share, causing a financial crisis and existential crisis for KRG in reality. Some experts believe this move was punishment for the KRG's close ties with the US. Since then, the KRG has faced repeated financial challenges, threatening its stability. The lack of federal budget transfers has plunged the KRG into a financial crisis, edging it towards an existential threat. To cope with the budget cuts, the Kurdistan regional government built a pipeline to connect its oil fields to the Iraq-Turkey pipeline. This allowed the KRG to export oil directly to Turkey and then to the international markets such as Europe, Asia, and Israel through the Turkish port of Ceylan. However, this move further intensified tension between Baghdad and Erbil. This has led to the second problem. The reason for this is that the federal government of Iraq and the KRG have different interpretation of Article 111 and 112. According to this article, that oil and gas are owned by all the people of Iraq in the regions and governorates. And the KRG, on the other hand, has a different interpretation. It's argued that the term present fields in the Article 112 refers only to the fields that were actively producing oil and gas in 2005 when the constitution was enacted. According to the KRG, this means that Iraqi government has no authority over the fields that were not only producing at that time, and of course this debate is ongoing, and the KRG started to produce and sell its oil after budget cut in 2014, and this has created huge fight between KRG and Iraqi government. Iraqi government has started to prevent KRG in different countries to sell its oil, and this issue is continuous still between KRG and the Kurdistan regional government. It's still unsolved, this problem. The second problem is unimplemented Article 140 regarding disputed Kurdish territories. The Article 140 of the Iraqi constitution is the crucial and highly sensitive provision that addresses the issues of disputed territories in Iraq, particularly those claimed by the Kurdistan regional government. These territories, including Kirkuk, Sinjar, Khanaqin, and Maghmur, which have significant Kurdish population, but were not included in the Kurdistan region when its borders were defined after the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003. Article 140 outlines process to resolve the status of these territories, but its implementation has been delayed for years and leading to ongoing tension between the KRG and federal government in Iraq. According to these regulations or articles, Saddam Hussein removed Kurds from Kirkuk. The Kurds described this policy as Arabization of the region. And according to these articles, the Iraqi government first have to ask those who came, settlers, if you like, settler colonialism in Kurdish regions, that these people coming from different parts of Iraq, from Basra or from Najaf, they should go back to their home, and this is called normalization. And then after the normalization process, a census should have been taken. Now, most recently was about 2 months ago, was the census took place there. And then finally, a referendum must be held to allow the residents of these territories to decide whether they want to be join the Kurdistan region or remain under the control of the federal government. And debate on these issues is continuous. Still, this problem is not solved. The third problem between Iraqi federal government and KRG is the Peshmerga, the status of the Kurdish forces, Kurdish Peshmerga. The Peshmerga's political legitimacy was formalized in 2005 Iraqi constitutions, and under the Article 121, which designates it's as part of the Iraq's defense system and grant the KRG authority over internal security. However, the constitution also created some debates between Baghdad and KRG. Indeed, Baghdad is responsible for funding, equipping, and training the Peshmerga. Despite this, KRG has often operated independently, as Baghdad has largely failed to provide support to KRG, to the Peshmerga. And for example, during the ISIS crisis, and the Peshmerga relied on outdated weapons and international assistance, particularly from the US, to combat the threat, while Baghdad's support was minimal or non-existent. The Iraqi officials argued that the constitution does not mandate separate funding for the Peshmerga, but the KRG view is that the Peshmerga is essential to the regional security and a symbol of Kurdish autonomy. The main issues, I think, here, the Iraqi government is very much interested to dismantle the KRG, and they think there's better starting with, firstly, economically dismantling, and secondly, military dismantling KRG, and therefore they are reluctant to support the Peshmerga. As scholar Alterman and Carling stated that the Kurdish authorities were frustrated with the ethnic mentality in Baghdad, the Kurdistan regional government held a historical and long-expected referendum on Kurdistan independence in 2017. Almost 93% of those who took part in the referendum voted overwhelmingly to split from Iraq. The opposition of the US and UK government to the referendum has encouraged the regional countries with significant Kurdish population to crush the Kurdish century long yearning for self-rule and freedom from the occupation or displacement or foreign powers interference in their homeland. So in coordination with the Turkish President Erdogan and the Iranian government, the Iraqi Prime Minister closed Kurdish airspace to the Iraqi Kurdish region, and Iran shut its frontier with the Kurdistan to impose a trade ban. Turkey opened its border for the Iraqi forces to surround the Kurdistan autonomous region to force the KRG to nullify the result of the referendum and hand over border control to Iraqi government. On 16 October, the Iraqi forces and Iranian-backed Shia militants of Hashdi al-Shabi, in coordination of the head of the Iranian Quds Force, a unit of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qasem Soleimani, started to attack the Kurdish forces in Kirkuk province. The ethnically mixed, oil-rich city Kirkuk is the center of the conflict. More than 78% voted in favor of independence, and the use of military forces against the Kurds was a violation of the Iraqi constitution. According to Iraqi constitution, Article 9, the Iraqi government are not allowed to use military internally against its people. At the end of the day, the Kurds lost the disputed territories, and this was very bitter result for the Kurds, and they have been forced to postpone their dream aspiration for independence. So now, of course, the debate is continue how to deal with Iraq. The Prime Minister Masroor Barzani was about 2 or 3 years here at the Chatham House. He was talking about, he was saying the federalism in Iraq doesn't work. We need a loose confederation. But I can see they stopped to talk about also confederation, and the main reason is the most Western countries are mostly interested in a unified Iraq. They believe that unified Iraq can bring stability in the region. But if we look at the conflict within Shia in Baghdad, in the Shia house, and also within the Kurds and Sunnis, Iraq looks like a failed state and will continue with problems. I consider this policy of Western countries to force the KRG to be part of Iraq as a forced marriage. In one way, KRG doesn't want to be part of Iraq anymore, but in other way, Iran, the regional countries like Turkey and Iran, but also US and UK are continue to have the discourse of unified Iraq, and some countries using unified democratic Iraq, which is a dream and it didn't work since 2003, and it will not work also. So of course now we have another
going on, and this environment where the peace process takes place is not only limited.
The situation for Iran as the state which dominates Rojhelat or Eastern Kurdistan. So on the eve of the 7th of October attack by Hamas on Israel, Iran was already embroiled in multiple crises. Iran was already under quite significant sanctions by the United States, even though Biden administration had relaxed some of the enforcement of the sanctions which had been inherited from Trump's maximum pressure. So Iranian economy was extremely in dire situation. Internally, the Islamic Republic had lost most of its legitimacy following the 2009 so-called Green Movement, after which the so-called reformist factions within the Iranian regime were marginalized. And as a result, the pent-up anger within Iranian society and discontent with the regime did not have any legal avenue for expression through engineered elections, as it was the case before. Iran was already, as I'm trying to say, in crisis. But the 7th of October actually made things even worse, or extremely worse for Iran, because Iranian deterrence policy, as well as its negotiating strategy with the West, relied on its regional proxies, the so-called axis of resistance, comprising the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Assad regime, as well as Houthis in Yemen. So Iran, through these allied forces, was able to project power across the region, influence domestic politics in Iraq, in Lebanon, and also the position of the Hamas as part of the wider Palestinian movement in Palestine, Israel. And this axis has effectively been destroyed over the last year or so. And especially following the fall of the Assad regime, Iran has very little instruments to help its allies to rebuild and recover from devastating effect of Israeli military attacks. Simultaneously, Iran's missile project, which was also part of its deterrence, has been diminished according to Israeli and Western officials. So now that Trump has come to power again with this new round of maximum pressure, Iran has very little actually to bargain with. So the Islamic Republic is therefore in an extremely weak position. And as it's the case with the Iranian regime since the revolution, whenever it's externally weak, it becomes even more repressive and brutal internally. So as I speak now, there are two female Kurdish activists, Pakhshan Azizi and Warisha Moradi, who have been sentenced to death. Pakhshan's appeal to the Supreme Court has been rejected, so she could be executed at any moment. Now, I think the significance of this is that Iranian regime always uses concentrated and extreme violence against Kurdish movement in Iran for two purposes. One is because Kurdish part of Iran, Eastern Kurdistan, and its political parties and civil societies is the most radical, most organized, and most determined opposition of the Islamic Republic. So threatening and diminishing the appetite of the population for opposition to the regime is part of the regime's attempt to preempt the eruption of any form of collective protest in Kurdistan, which could very rapidly spread to the rest of Iran, as it happened a couple of years ago with the state murder of Jina Amini. Similarly, you do or say anything, this is what awaits you. But at the same time, the fact that the Iranian regime can get away with such brutal treatment of the Kurds is partly because the ideology of Iranian nationalism has been such that a significant part of Iranian population consider Kurdish movement in Iran as a separatist movement, a threat to Iranian integrity, and so on and so forth. So for Iranian regime is less costly actually to kill the Kurds, to put it simply. So at the moment, I think that's the iron fist of Islamic Republic is concentrated on Kurdistan because it's fearing a potential, I would say likely confrontation with the West, in which case Kurdistan could be really the shock troop of the coming revolution in Iran, to which I come back in a minute. So this is the context within which then Kurdish movement exists today. I want to say a few things about Kurdish civil society in Iran as well as Kurdish political parties. So Kurdish civil society is remarkably solid and unified and diverse. There are hundreds of different associations, ecological societies, cultural centers and associations teaching Kurdish language to children and whoever wants to learn outside the education system, which obviously bans Kurdish language in Iran. And many of these organizations, this non-governmental or civil society organization, also have an implicit political function because obviously they provide community and cohesion for local population. And at times of emergencies and natural disasters, as we have witnessed over the last 10 years or so, these organizations actually are the first to go to help with dealing with the disasters. But as I said, they could be very quickly turned into political functions as well if needed. So Kurdish society is extremely politicized, is very radical and quite organized. And therefore it's of, I would say, unrivaled actually capacity for political action in Iran and I would say even in wider region. Now, unlike the civil society of Kurdistan in Iran, the Kurdish political parties have been historically quite divided. And this goes back to the early 90s when the armed wings of Kurdish organizations, as we know as Peshmerga forces, were forced to retreat into Iraqi Kurdistan, the Bashur. And the formation of KRG was simultaneously a blessing but also a significant barrier on Kurdish political parties' operation because KRG had its own strategic or trade relations with Iran, and as a result, it would not allow Kurdish forces to operate from Iraqi Kurdistan militarily against Iran. But at the same time, the experience of Kurdish self-rule in Iraqi Kurdistan obviously has given an impetus to Kurdish population in Iran. What we have seen over the recent months is that Kurdish political parties in Rojhelat have come closer to some sort of cooperation. Recently, there was a general strike in Iranian Kurdistan in protest to the death sentence against Bakhshan Azizi, as I mentioned earlier. And in this general strike, multiple Kurdish organizations, who previously would never actually even sit together, issued a statement calling on Iranian Rojhelati Kurdish society to go on strike, and people went on strike as they had done before.
Followers. But it is also because he has articulated a substantive political vision of what a democratized and accommodationist Republic of Turkey could look like. The long and bloody Turkish-Kurdish conflict has led to over 40,000 deaths, the clear majority of whom were Kurds. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, have been displaced. Thousands of villages burned to the ground. State terror has been the order of the day. The Kurdish armed insurgency began under and against authoritarian conditions in 1984. And the leader of the PKK, Abdullah Öcalan, took refuge in Syria from 1979 to 1998. From the early 1990s, he would begin to call for a peace process to stop the carnage being unleashed upon his people. In 1998, Öcalan was forced to flee Syria after the Turks threatened to invade unless Öcalan was declared persona non grata. So began Öcalan's odyssey across Italy, Russia, and Greece in search of asylum and of European support for a peace process. The South Africans, under the ANC and Mandela, eventually granted him asylum after he had had little luck with the others. But en route to South Africa, he would be abducted in Kenya on February 15, 1999, in an operation spearheaded by the CIA and the Mossad. This is often referred to in Kurdish circles as the international conspiracy. The reaction to his abduction was intense, including dozens of his followers self-immolating in response. He was originally condemned to death, a sentence which, upon pressure from European authorities, would be commuted to life. As part of his defense for the European Court of Human Rights, he would elaborate a massive set of writings, including a declaration on the democratic solution to the Kurdish question, 2 volumes of prison writings, a manuscript translated into English as Beyond State Power and Violence, and a 5-volume manifesto for a democratic civilization. In these volumes, he elaborates a sweeping view, sketching the trajectory of a 5,000-year history of a dialectical struggle between the forces of hierarchy and those of democracy. In the process, he articulates an alternative understanding of what the struggle for self-determination can and must mean in the 21st century, a radical non-state, even anti-state paradigm featuring direct democracy, multicultural accommodation, gender emancipation, and ecological sustainability. In the Declaration on the Democratic Solution of the Kurdish Question, written as early as 1999, Öcalan makes clear that he considers that, quote, the right of nations for self-determination, which was fashionable in the 1970s, and which in practical terms meant establishing a separate state, was, in fact, a blind alley in this specific context. In the case of Kurdistan, he insists, it was obstructing the solution rather than solving the problem. Indeed, Öcalan is adamant that his project is not, quote, separatism, but perhaps a move for the greatest union with Turkey and the Turks, a move towards strength, and once again becoming a leader in the Middle East, the Caucasus and the Balkans. There is no way of achieving this, he contends, other than through a free union. Amidst Öcalan's prison writings stand out a relatively concise 2009 document called The Roadmap to Democratization of Turkey and Solution to the Kurdish Question. In that document, Öcalan traces a substantive political vision with the promising potential for overcoming decades of bloody war and for ushering in an era of democracy and peace.
In the region, the smuggling of arms and prisons of foreign fighters fuels the war and make the conflict